It's A Quake.
Welcome to the 12th edition of It's A Quake. Hashtag YouthQuake Namibia is a youth initiative under NMT, and as well known, NMT is after all well in facilitating as well as fostering engagement of young people both on social, economical and political levels. So that's why this time we're gathered to have ourselves a debate. Allow me to take this opportunity to welcome our invited guests. On our panel of judges, Ms. Naita Haishono. She is Executive Director at the National Institute for Democracy. We also have Ms. Tatuda Haitula, who is a former teacher, HR officer, and currently serving as the Museum Development Officer. He will also be playing the role as timekeeper in today's debate. And finally, our chairperson, Ms. Loide Angula, who is the former national and regional debate champion and also a regional coach. Can we have a round of applause, please? Beautiful. I'll also take this opportunity to welcome all our stakeholders. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us in today's debate. The Embassy of Finland, the National Institute for Education Development, NANSO, Commerce Directorate of Education, Arts and Culture, College of the Arts, the Namibian newspaper, as well as Desert Radio, and the director of NMT, Ms. Zoe Titus. Can we have another round of applause, please? And finally, we cannot have a debate without debaters. So allow me to welcome the Unm Debate Society, as well as the Nust Debate Society. A round of applause, please. Today's motion is one that's very important to be tackled in the day and age, and that's why we're all gathered here. And the motion stands that this House believes our current education curriculum is crucial for the betterment of society. I'll now hand over the mic to the first speaker of the proposition team to make their opening speech.
The rules for today's debate for the motion titled, "This House believes that our current education curriculum is crucial for the betterment of society," are as follows. Speeches will be 5 minutes. After the first minute, the timekeeper will indicate the first bang, one hit, please, to show that points of information are now allowed and the opposing house can interject. The second bang will be hit at 4 minutes to indicate that points of interjection are no longer allowed. And the third bang with 2 strokes will show that a speaker has 30 seconds left to round up their speeches and conclude. And the last bang, that will be from 5 minutes, that will hit continuously, will show that the speaker's time is up and done. Speeches will not have reply speeches. Only first, second, and third speakers will, only a first speech, a second speech, and a third speech, which means third speakers will also have to conclude for their house. I now welcome the first speaker from the proposition team, Unm Debate Society, Menerenjambi Chiverua. Let's welcome her.
Madam Chair, the world doesn't operate on rules. It's a survival of the fittest. So each nation around the world is tasked with the responsibility of adapting and developing its nation. So has Namibia with the introduction of the new curriculum. The curriculum has been developed to give direction to basic education towards the realization of Namibian Vision 2030. It ensures continuity for the foundation principles of the Namibian education system described towards education for all. The curriculum tackles core skills and key learning areas that help us in the advancement of our education system. Furthermore, in today's debate, we as a proposition, we will show you how the new curriculum is crucial for the betterment of our society because one, it helps us with the achievement of our education system in achieving the requirements that come with the rights of free education, while enshrining the ideas of accessibility, affordability, quality that must be and must be of acceptable standards in us assessing the value of an education system. A few points of argumentation within today's debate. Firstly, we must look at the significance and purpose of an education system, be it globally or just within the bounds of Africa. One, an education system is a vital tool in a country's development. This is because the moment the education system is of acceptable quality, it has trickle-down effects. It has a trickle-down effect because it ensures that the quality of the working sector is of paramount value, which then increases the country's whole output, which in particular sector, which increases the general value of the nation's wealth. Of things like teachers and scientists. The moment we ensure that our education system is one that's producing quality teachers or quality scientists, we ensure that these particular people are of experienced nature to really bring better, more ideas within our country, which later then advances the working sector, be it blue collar or white collar, which then helps the nation's general output. Furthermore, we feel like we need to understand why Namibia felt the necessity to introduce a new curriculum, both primary school or secondary school within this particular instance. The basic education curriculum started in 2012. This system started in phases, right? It didn't just initially just one day we just decided to put a system. We started from the lowest level of education, be it pre-primary or lower primary schools, to now secondary school level. We feel like with that instance, it means that our education system didn't just merely, our education providers didn't merely just feel the need to just introduce a policy, but they felt that it was of necessity that introduce it in the small amount of quantity as possible to ensure that the adjustment to this curriculum is one that is effective and that everybody can adjust to, so it's not something being pushed down our throat. We feel like now with the introduction of the new curriculum, especially with AS level, this is like the third crucial stage within developing our education system. The advancement of our education system started by achieving two main principles in achieving the right to education, which is accessibility and affordability. They achieved that by ensuring free education for all, with primary schools now not even being required to pay education, but also made sure that it is affordable, so that in the instance when school required that it was of an affordable amount that everybody can engage to. But furthermore, they further ensured accessibility by taking down schools to the most remote areas as possible. But now, before we can assess if our education, we have achieved that our education system is accessible and is affordable. Now we must assess if that education system is of a paramount quality. Can that education system allow us to compete on the global scales? Can that education system allow us to have effective output of workflow when it comes to blue collar, white collar? That is what the new curriculum in terms of introduction of AS level is trying to achieve. It's trying to advance to make sure that our education system is of quality and is of acceptable value. Why is this important? We feel that this is important because one is the right to education is an enshrined right, both in local or international elements and in our constitution. But in order to achieve that right and ensure that particular right is achieved by every particular nation, we have to ensure that those three pillars are enshrined. So you can have an accessible education, you can have an affordable education, but for as long as that quality of that education and the value of that education on a global scales is one that is of no significance, we feel that is not then achieving adequate, giving the right to education accessibility to everybody else. But furthermore, the significance of allowing this particular system to proceed on is of a paramount importance. Why do I say so? Because the right to education is globally guaranteed right, and the state has an obligation to ensuring that particular right, by respecting it, by refraining from interference with the enjoyment of this particular right, but also further protecting it and adapting measures towards full realization of that right. We feel like our state has achieved that particular mandate and obligation by introducing this new policy. We might have an opposition that argues on the merits of how with this it's not effective in the sense that with AS level results to know these particular issues within the new curriculum. We feel like we can't fully assess the value of our curriculum now in this time because of how when it was introduced. With this, I'm supremely proud to propose.
We thank the first debater, the first speaker of the Unm Debate Society for that delivered speech. Before I call upon the first speaker of the Nust Debating Society, I would advise speakers to speak at a well-paced speed. Muye Kachire, come forward.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Mena comes up here and she makes the debate about something that it's not. She talks to us about the right to education. We're fine with that. We don't care. Like, we're not trying to remove it. That's not the debate we're having. And she also talks about the quality of this particular education. Why is this quality of this particular education a debate here? Why is it relevant? Because that's not something we're saying. We're not saying that we need to decrease the quality. This team needs to come and talk to us and tell us why those particular things are relevant in this debate, right? Anyway, moving on to my positive argumentation. First line is, who is this debate about, right? What we need to understand is that this debate is not about your upper middle class or your upper class children, right? We're not talking about your kids who go to St. George's. We're not talking about your kids who go to gymnasium. We're not talking about those particular kind of children. We're also not necessarily talking about certain children in Windhoek High and Yanmore, right? The reason being is that these particular children are shielded from the harms of a bad curriculum. No matter how bad that curriculum is, they have enough financial resources backing them in order for them to be successful and still be part of the top 5% of earners in this particular country, right? So then even if this particular student in gymnasium fails 100 times, their parents have resources to get them to whatever in other institution they need to get this child in order for this child to become a doctor, engineer, etc., right? So that child's future is already settled, and the harms of a bad curriculum is something that they don't feel at all, right? Who is this debate about? This debate is about your lower class, right? It consists of the driving force in our particular societies, right? So then what we mean by this, we're talking about children who, after school, you go and sell food there with your mom, you go to a certain tender, your dad is building a house. Those are the children we're debating about, because those are the majority of children in society, and those are the children who are the driving force of our country, right, at its core. And it also becomes, anyway, moving on. And it also becomes very important to understand that these are the children who need this particular help because of their heavy reliance on the government. I remain standing because of their heavy reliance on the government. They don't have these particular resources for them to go and repeat 100 times. So then the fact that these kids have access to free education, government has a mandate to make sure that by the time they finish grade 12, these children are employable and they have the necessary skills in order to to maximize their happiness in their community and in their particular country. Those are the actors who are most important in this particular debate. And with the metric on the measurement on whether we succeed is whether or not we put enough of these children into our workforce in order to develop the country. I'll take you, Kara.
Can you give us the principled argument why intrinsically the education curriculum, the current educational curriculum, is not important for the development?
Well done. Leads me to my second line of argumentation, right? Which is, how has government failed? How has the current curriculum failed these children right here? So then what you want to do, what you want to understand is that when a child from Okakarara, right, who's very poor, who lives in the villages of or Tumborombong or whatever, when this child goes to Okakarara High School, right, they need to leave that high school with the skills that they need to sort of maximize their happiness in that particular region. What you need to understand is that in those particular places, these children don't need to learn history, or they don't need to learn about the microvilli or how the heart pumps blood. What these people need is the skills is the skill set that can genuinely contribute to their immediate into their immediate reality, right? So then when a child goes and finishes grade 12 and they still don't know how to lay a single brick or to build a house, right? We feel like government has failed in that particular, in their mandate to maximize this child's happiness. Because what you need to understand, in the most rural of areas, you have one individual who knows bricklaying for their entire region, right? There's a high demand for this particular job, for this particular labor, but then there is very little people who know how to do this particular thing, right? So then what you have is children who finish grade 12 with nothing to show for it. They are not able to commercialize the skills that they have. They don't know enough about the skills that can bring them money, right? So then in that particular instance, the fact that government is not centered their curriculum around teaching these children how to have a skill set that can generally contribute towards their reality, that they can commercialize and turn into money to feed themselves, we feel like that is how the curriculum has failed, right? How can government fix this? Third line of argumentation, which is, first, by understanding that a developing nation's needs is industrial work, right? When you look at how America got to where it is, we're not talking about Britain. They got there through by getting cotton, tobacco, the industrial phase, right? This is all work that was sort of that's blue collar, right? This is what drives the development in any given particular country. The absence of this means that this country will be stagnant and will continue to be in the state of developing. Our curriculum is based on a country that is developed and meeting the needs of a developed state, and does not necessarily meet the needs of a developing state, right? Of a developing state. Because even if you had 1 million doctors don't drive development in a country. And with that, I thank you.
We thank Muye for that speech. And now call upon the second debater, the second speaker from the Unm Debate Society, Densley Nipandula. Let's welcome him.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before we start today's debate, I first want to address Muya on his biggest concern today and a problem that we particularly have a problem with in his speech today. Firstly, he was talking about how people from Okakarara intrinsically don't need the skills provided in the current curriculum, and they can learn things that are more appropriate to the environment in which they live in. Firstly, I would first want to mention that this was the ideology that existed within the old curriculum, where it doesn't broaden individuals' opportunities to expand everywhere outside their community. So initially, a child like Kaura, who came from Okakarara, who's my third speaker, wouldn't be able to get out of Okakarara and do law as he currently is, because that's the problem that exists within the old curriculum. The whole point of the new curriculum, Mr. Speaker, is to give people, is to provide for a competitive marketplace in which individuals have skills broad enough for them to go in whatever ventures they wish to go. So if a kid from Okakarara wants to go to do law, then he can do law. And if a kid from Amuthia wants to go do law, he can do that as well. And also, Mr. Speaker, before we head into how Muye is talking about how the new curriculum affects the most poorest of communities, the most poorest of people, and initially it's not conducive enough for these people, not now Muye, it's not conducive enough for these people to thrive. Firstly, we want to mention that the old curriculum is part of Vision 2030, which was intrinsically for the poorest of communities. And what do I mean by this, Mr. Speaker? We're talking about the new curriculum and initially its initial goals and its aims and aspirations to grow the nation holistically. The government focused on things like affordability and accessibility of education, and we've seen these things happening ever since 2012 when the curriculum was implemented. Why do you think in primary school kids were getting free education as the curriculum kept progressing? Because this is an initial stress point of the new curriculum. Not only should education be affordable, but it should be accessible, Mr. Speaker. And the reason Muya specifically has a problem understanding this is that as a kid coming from Concordia College, not necessarily the most wealthiest of child, I only paid 250. I paid 250 to go into the hostel, and therefore education was accessible for me in the sense that I'm actually able to go to school, but it's also affordable in the sense that I'm actually able to afford that school. That is the reason schools are coming up in all places in Katutura right now to provide this education for the most broadest of people. So secondly, I also want to state the confusion that exists in current days and why the new curriculum is a point of topic today. Firstly, we have to understand that the old curriculum was getting implemented ever since 2014 to current day, and the only times these questions that Muye is talking about, in which people are failing and people initially want to do bricklaying, is a point of question, is because at the current stage that it's being implemented in grade 12, and it's being implemented in grade 12. In grade 12 is the most crucial of grades within the basic educational system. So of course people pay attention to grade 12. But we also have to note that the current corona pandemics, which affected governmental functions in the way that they can actually execute things, is something that they also struggled with, Mr. Speaker. The reason I'm saying this is because with the corona pandemic, most of us, this is our first pandemic if it's not for all of us, and people don't know and were uncertain on what we should do as government and what we should do as individuals. At the beginning of the corona pandemic, not only was school hindered in the sense that people are going to school today and not going tomorrow, and people are having online and not online, and this hinders the people that are actually able to access education online, but those are the problems that intrinsically happened exclusively because of the pandemic, and we didn't have these problems until 2020 and late 2019, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not only did Hage Geingob yesterday announce that people aren't allowed to wear masks and all of that stuff, and we're transitioning from an uncertain system of actually conducting things like education and all of that stuff, but we still find that the provision of education is something that's still difficult to provide because of the pandemic. And a great example of this is that some people here are wearing masks, some people here are not wearing masks, and the reason that initially happened is because people were uncertain of the times as we're transitioning within the pandemical system, Mr. Speaker. But before I proceed with my speech, Muya.
Nobody's advocating for the old curriculum. I mean, even if we were, are you saying there are no lawyers or doctors from the old curriculum?
No, what I'm saying is the problem with the old curriculum is that most people that wanted to do other things like law and all of that stuff didn't have access to that. They didn't have access to education that allowed them to go into that marketplace. That's initially why schools are being made more accessible, more affordable, so that people can actually have access to those things that you speak about, Mr. Speaker. However, I have to give it to opposition in the sense of that we have to differentiate value from incorporation and time of incorporation. We have to understand that the time incorporation shouldn't be mixed up with the value that the curriculum provides, Mr. Speaker. So we can agree with the circumstances of the corona pandemic. Incorporation is something that's difficult to make, but it doesn't speak to the value of the curriculum, rather the incorporation and how difficult it was to implement those things. But we can also point to the fact that the current curriculum is still something that was smoothly incorporated until the corona pandemic. So things such as that are also things that we can point to, Mr. Speaker. So is the old curriculum? Thank you.
Now we thank Unam's second speaker for that delivered speech and welcome Nust. Second speaker, Loto Nangonda. Let's welcome her.
Now, panel, it is important to understand that today's debate is not about accessibility, affordability of education. It is necessarily about the compatibility of the curriculum that exists right now in the status quo and how it matches up to the demands of that particular government that we exist in, right? Living in Namibia, living in a developing nation, means that a lot of our economic growth is based on industries such as mining, fishing, and all these types of blue-collar jobs that exist in this particular society. But for some reason, right, we want to be the America of Africa and reach for white-collar jobs. There is social pressure on children to become accountants, lecturers, and this is fundamentally based on the fact that the new curriculum sort of advocates for that type of narrative in society. Let's quickly get into what our stance is, which is essentially what Muya was trying to get to towards the end of his speech, right? He was talking about how we should revamp the entire curriculum. We're not defending the old curriculum in this particular debate. Our stance is, just to make it clear again, is that we're revamping the entire curriculum. That's what we feel like is a better world for a developing nation. Meaning that because there's high demand for farmers, there's a high demand for like people in the agriculture sector, mining sector, mines and all these type of things. We revamp the curriculum in a high school sense to make all high school graduates equipped to those particular skills. So it basically means if we're gonna have to make all high schools, VTCs and vocational training, and we do so in order to equip these particular individuals or learners with the skills to meet that particular demand. Because the problem that exists in society, or the status quo right now, is that there's a high saturation in terms of like employment, and there's a high unemployment rate because everybody wants to be an accountant. Everybody wants to have a suit when they go to work. The whole mining thing, the being a farmer, staying at home, mining, all these type of things. These are things that are frowned upon in Namibian society. But weirdly enough, these are the things that make our economy boom. These are the things that make our economy grow as a developing nation. That's something that proposition fails to understand in today's particular debate. Now let's quickly get into a few rebuttals, right? So what we hear from proposition is that the old curriculum was still, the whole old curriculum was bad and all that type of thing. There's a misconception on that. The old curriculum was just a down version of like the new curriculum. The new curriculum just, betters people for like, or learners to like a tertiary level, a tertiary education, right? But fundamentally, it was still a white-collar job-based curriculum. All these two curriculums, the new AS curriculum, the old curriculum, they're white-collar based, right? Secondly, they talk about how it was part of the 2030 sort of vision and how that intrinsically makes it good. Just because it was part of 2030 doesn't make it inherently right? We have 6,000 people or learners who failed the new curriculum. And he bases it on the idea that people are unable to access online. Well, I was an AS student last year, and I can quite, like, with beyond a shadow of a doubt, tell you that it is fundamental for you to be able to access the internet, irregardless of whether or not the pandemic existed. You needed sort of like access to external information because this new curriculum is new, right? So there isn't material or there isn't access to that adequate material or teaching material. Even the teachers need to go for tests. Even the teachers need to go for re-evaluations and all the type of things. It's really messed up, right, in and of itself. But even if it wasn't, we think that it still doesn't cater towards Namibia's primary needs, which is essentially, right, sort of creating more blue-collar jobs, so people who are catered to all those type of things that makes an economy grow. And an example that Muya was using in his particular speech, the whole idea of how, Britain used the industries, started trading, all these other things. They took advantage of what they were good in, and then after that, after laying the foundation for their local markets to thrive, after laying the foundation for their learners and their citizens, which is essentially the obligation or the sole obligation that government has to fulfill. They then went into like international markets. They then went into international standards. We think there's no reason for us to show face to the US and other particular countries about how, oh good, we have, advanced subsidiary and our kids, know SPDF in chemistry and all these type of things, when our kids aren't being employed, when the learners aren't getting jobs, when the economy isn't growing. Government has an obligation primarily to these learners that are suffering, that are not being employed, and it has that particular obligation. With that, I beg to oppose.
It's a Quake.
The third speaker from the proposition team, the Unm Debate Society, Kaura Upura. Let's welcome him.
Madam Speaker, doing something over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. That's exactly what the opposition is doing. What they're trying to do is overemphasize the importance of blue-collar jobs while not focusing on white-collar jobs. The reason why the old curriculum failed is because there's an over-focus on white-collar jobs and there's a saturation of the white-collar industry. What they do on their side is that, one, they want us to focus more on blue-collar jobs that result in the over-saturation of the blue-collar industry that will get us in the same place that we are today, and that's particularly problematic. Then why do we win today's debate? Mena's speech was particularly important to this debate because, one, we need to prove to you why this new education curriculum is accessible to the most poorest of communities that they speak about. Two, why it is affordable. And three, why it is of quality. What we mean by quality, we mean that, one, it's able to put Namibia on an equally competitive level. Two, it is able to give skills to learners that they will need in order to be able to improve the economical status of the country. So we prove to you that the current educational system is, one, accessible, two, of quality, then we win today's debate. And that's particularly important. But a few points of rebuttals, right? Firstly, let's deal with the issue of how the education curriculum is not accessible to the most poorest of communities, the communities that don't have, Havana and so forth. The new curriculum was made specifically for the most poorest of communities. Why do I say so? There has been an introduction of vocational subjects at primary and secondary school. We see that at the primary level, you can do subjects such as agriculture, subjects such as home ecology, and these are important subjects, particularly for someone coming from Makakarara, where you are a farmer and you farm, and you can continue with these subjects at both secondary level, at schools such as HTS, and furthermore, you can continue to specialize in this particular subject at vocational training centers. And why the educational curriculum system is particularly important is because, one, there are two entry systems. One, you can go from grade 11, and two, from grade 12. So that means that if you have your vocational subjects such as your agriculture and your home ecology, you can decide to go to a vocational training center from grade 11, and that's particularly important within today's debate, right? Three, then they talk about how, one, the white collar jobs are not particularly important and they don't provide us with the skills that we need to drive our economy. Mr. Speaker, an economy driven by one sector is an economy that is failing. It's particularly important that we need to diversify our economy. The world is moving into a fourth industrial revolution right now, so we need white collar jobs. We need both white collar and blue collar. How the new curriculum caters for that problem? One, you allow, not now, I will let you know when I'm ready. One, how the new curriculum caters for both of white collar and first collar is, one, we introduce vocational subjects such as agriculture, home ecology, for both primary and secondary level. Two, we allow learners to specialize in their various fields of if you want to become a scientist, then in grade 12 you can decide to take your biology and your physical science at an advanced stage. That means that when you go to university, you won't struggle, you have the necessary skills that you would need, and when you eventually do graduate, you become a productive member of society, and that's particularly important. Three, let's tackle the issue of a high unemployment, right? It was disingenuous of Lotto to come here and say that the reason why learners are failing is because they don't have access to the internet. Even though densely say that, but one, what we mean is that because, one, the new curriculum in senior, in grade 12 and 11 was implemented during the pandemic, right? So there's so many issues that were going on. Kids were losing their loved ones. Kids were losing their mothers. People were losing their livelihoods. Kids were not secure that, will I be able to have food on the table tomorrow? Will I go on a hungry stomach to school? I don't know, because what if my parents lose their job? It's a pandemic, there are lockdowns. All of these things have an effect on how these kids do in school, right? The reason why then Denzel mentioned primary school and why there hasn't been any complaints in primary school is because when the new curriculum was implemented in primary school, we're not in the pandemic, so there were no issue of kids failing and so forth. But however, why there's so much emphasis when it comes to grade 11 and 12 is because the system was implemented during a pandemic, and as such, kids were going through psychological harm, traumas, and all of these things, and that's why they were failing. Quickly, Muye.
Kaura, the old curriculum and the new curriculum have the same content matter. The old one had agriculture as well, right? But there's still 6 million people being unemployed because the curriculum is failing. How do you address that?
This is where you go wrong. The old curriculum and the new curriculum don't have the same subject matter. The reason why the new curriculum was introduced is to be able to make for the deficit that we're missing from the old curriculum. The reason why I mentioned to you that you can both do vocational subjects such as agriculture and home ecology, both at primary and secondary schools at one. There are 2 exit levels in the new curriculum. You can exit through grade 11 and you can exit through grade 12. That means that when you do a vocational subject for both from primary and secondary school, it allows you to be able to effectively advance into your vocational training centers, as opposed to the old curriculum where you only had to go throughout grade 12 and you are forced to do your white collar subjects that you do not want in the debate, and that's why you failed to this debate. So what do we then win to this debate? We win to this debate because we prove to you why the education curriculum is accessible to the most poorest of communities, and it gives skills that you need, such as your agriculture and these vocational training subjects. 3, we prove to you why it's both of quality, because 1, we ensure that the country effectively develops.
We thank the third speaker for the Unm Debate Society for his speech and call upon the third speaker for the Nust Debate Society, Thandiwe Ndlovu, to conclude today's debate. Here, let's welcome her.
All right, panel, allow me to bring some clarity to today's debate. I'll use an example just to make it more specific and maybe bring direction to what exactly is happening in today's debate. If you have malaria and we give you medication for tuberculosis, it's not going to deal with the problem that you have. And this is what we are specifically saying as the opposition team is the fault with the AS level curriculum. The reason why we tell you this is because we feel that the AS level curriculum does not directly address the needs that exist within Namibia's workforce, and that is the problem in today's debate that they fail to then deal with. In their argumentation, they were supposed to tell us, number one, why the AS level is one that is particularly important to drive Namibia's economy and not any other economy but Namibia's economy. But allow me to engage them on the little that we hear from them. Essentially, their arguments are that, one, the AS level is affordable. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't think that that is any different from what we present to you, because we think that in a case where Namibia brings a curriculum that speaks to the needs of Namibia, it can be easily accessible, it can be free, and I don't know why they think that is only exclusive to the AS level. So for that reason alone, they lose today's debate. They then come up with this idea that in Mena's speech, she speaks of necessity and she talks about how this was implemented gradually. We don't think that the implementation is of concern at this particular point. What is of concern at this particular point is whether the AS levels address the needs of Namibia and Namibia's economy. In our argumentations, we tell you that Namibia at this point and the level that we are at economically, we need more blue-collar jobs as opposed to white-collar jobs, and that's not something that they engage us on, and for that reason alone, they have failed miserably in today's debate. I'll take you a bit later. What do they then come and tell us? They tell us that no, the new curriculum addresses blue-collar work because there is agriculture. We don't think that it should be implemented in such a way where, just have a little agriculture subject. We think that there should be specific emphasis and more emphasis on practical work as opposed to just mathematics, science, and chemistry. We think that if we are to tell you that Namibia does chemistry or Namibia does mathematics and you're just doing basic 1 + 1, you have failed at that specific thing and you don't have the right to say that we focus or we deal with mathematics. We think similarly, because the curriculum does not address vocational learning, it has already failed in terms of doing what is needed. We think that the government should essentially look at what it is that's needed in Namibia's economy and address that. In our argumentation, when we tell you that countries like America that have developed had to pass through the developing stage through industrialization, where they were doing cotton, which is what helped push the development of these countries. We think that when Namibia tries to jump this stage and go straight to doing things like science, we do not address the issue that exists in terms of job creation, and that starts at grassroots level, where we think we need to create jobs, and you don't create any jobs when you neglect blue-collar work. So we think because of that reason alone, they fail. I'll take you quickly.
Thandiwe, what disqualifies you from going to VTC in your grade 11 or 12.
All right. The pressure that exists in society for one to be a doctor or an accountant is one that we think is particularly problematic. We think that when government fails to encourage vocational school, it has failed in that particular case. We think that the societal pressure that exists right now in society for one to go to do AS level is the reason why you find so many people at NAMCOL as opposed to finding those people at VTC. So we think that government needs to push the agenda that pushes the growth of the economy. When government encourages people to do vocational training center and the blue collar work, that is when we will feel that the education system is effective. What do we then tell you in today's debate? We also tell you that an issue that will exist because of the AS level is brain drain. We think that we are producing graduates or people for jobs that don't exist in the market. And the only thing that happens is that these people go to other countries, go abroad and use their skills in those particular countries, only leaving Namibia in a worse state than it is. We think that when we look at countries such as Zimbabwe that have adopted the AS level themselves, very well educated people, but it doesn't necessarily speak to the needs that exist in Zimbabwe, and we think that because of such, it has already failed its people. So what do we tell you, and why do we say that we prefer a system that is not, that why we say that the AS level is not what will drive Namibia's economy? We think that when an education system is implemented, it should address the needs that exist, and we tell you that Namibia's needs are not that which is supplied for by the AS level. We think that Namibia should focus more on practicality and should then push all these funds and these good things that they talk about towards vocational centers and towards encouraging people to do vocational school. So in essence, we tell you that their entire argumentation of accessibility also exists in our world and is therefore not anything that is mutually exclusive to them. And with this, we are so proud to oppose.
I would like to thank Tandiwe for that delivered speech. And with this, we have reached the end of the debate. We will take a break to adjudicate and discuss debate matters. Delilah, your cue.
Quite a beautiful and intensive debate that was. And as we allow the judges a platform to take a look at who won today's debate, I want to open up this opportunity to our stakeholder audience. I want to find out if any one of you have questions, comments, something to contribute to this discussion that we have going on. And if you have, if you could just wave a little hand at me, and I'll make my way to you.
Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Simalumba, the Director for NIED, Ministry of Education. I was wondering, how do I contribute without judging? We have a dilemma. In any case, they've spoken very well, most of them, although there was, to some extent, a few of them, lack of general differentiation. And this I hear it also among public, between basic education and further education and training. They are two different things. Further education and training, that's where we have VTCs, colleges, technikon, and universities. Basic education is to lay the foundation to feed these. Basic education, we do not produce artisans or doctors, but we prepare foundation to produce those. Quite rightly, pre-vocational subjects are so many, although they did not touch on special education. We also catered for it in terms of vocational stream. Those in special schools like EROS, what, in the new curriculum. And yes, expansion of access, especially on ordinary level with the revised curriculum. I think that was done by increasing the number of schools, though a lot has to be kind of done. I'm grateful that one of the debaters indicated that we should not only focus on Namibia, but occupy a niche, even in SADC if possible, in terms of training human resources. Because fourth industrial revolution indicates to us that in the coming 15 years, there will be a need for more than 200 million. For example, data analysts, people are developing some softwares, and then software applications, including those who are working on, on many things. So it's an opportunity as a country to support and not train only for in here, but there. Although I also agree with others that yes, we have to also focus on our market. So people should balance the two. We are part of the global society, in short.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I'll take one more opinion. Gentleman over here.
Thank you for the opportunity to share some words. I'm from the Directorate of Education, and first of all, to compliment the debaters on solid and founded arguments. I'm just going to add to that, not by taking away anything. A lot of what appeared to be pressure was mounted towards the Ministry of Education, towards the curriculum and things like that. I just want to highlight on fellow stakeholders. For example, the learners. I'm teaching at a school, and I'll give you an example. I give my learners homework, and I come back the next day or after a week or two, and no one has done anything. So in that sense, is it the curriculum that's failing, or are the learners also failing themselves? I think in general, Namibian learners have a long way to go in terms of developing a study culture. I had a lot of friends in school that ended up failing because the night before the exam, he was watching Champions League in a bar. Simple things like that. So I think you also have to look at the learners themselves. I did a course, or I'm doing a course, and I did it on distance. And I found to study on distance was very easy for me because I had to plan my own time and my own schedules and things like that. But I get an impression from Namibian learners as if they want to be spoon-fed. They always want to be given the information. They don't seem to have this assertiveness to get things done on their own. And that is a crucial element for me. And we should also consider the role that parents and caregivers play. What do the NGOs, civil society, and our faith-based organizations, where do they all come in? And other government ministries, not only the Ministry of Education. In African culture, we say it takes a village to raise a child. So at the end of the day, it's not just going to be, I guess, the Ministry of Education and the curriculum. At the end of the day, we're talking of learner-centered education. So the people who are supposed to, at the end of the day, drive our curriculum forward are the learners or the students themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I'll just take one more contribution, and this is from one of our judges, Ms. Naita Hishono from the Namibia Institute for Democracy.
What I would just like to add, especially also from what the two previous speakers said, a big issue we've seen with Corona, and we see now with the war, with the different wars in the world, especially the recent war that broke out in Europe, is food security. And food security is really a big issue because when you look at Maslow's pyramid of needs, which you probably all learned, if the basis is not there, then, and if the soil is not nurtured where you're living in, and by the soil I mean the whole community that's spoken about here, then how do you even want the seed that's planted in that soil to grow? So as much as the world will tell you data analyst and everything that you would rather see on top of Maslow's pyramid of needs is important, what is in our soil? What do we put in our soil? What is about food security? Prices are going up. The first one that always goes up is petrol, and after that it's the food, because our food is brought in from South Africa, and everything else, it's a ripple effect. So food security is really a big issue, and a nation that doesn't secure its own food, a nation that doesn't have its own means of production, is a nation that's very dependent on other nation, and when you don't have the currency to pay for it, you're really in trouble. So I was glad to hear the different comments that were given today, and that you're really thinking about this issue and that you're thinking about tomorrow. So thank you very much for that.
I want to call on to the stage some remarks from the Embassy of Finland. Please help me welcome with a round of applause, Hanele Hupanen.
Thank you so much. My name is Hannele Hupanen. I'm the program coordinator at the Embassy of Finland. And I also want to thank Zoe and the NMT team for inviting me here, and of course the excellent debaters for the interesting debate. I definitely cannot speak to the technicalities of the Namibian education system or the curriculum, but it was very interesting to hear your takes, and definitely also to compare it to the Finnish system and the Finnish curriculum, which is also our pride and joy, which we also want to collaborate with Namibia on. We regularly engage with the education ministries and different stakeholders, and of course civil society, on matters of education and human rights, of course. Also, we've been supporting NMT with this project since 2017 through our fund for local cooperation, and that's why I'm also here. And it's been a real pleasure to support this project and to see the Youth Quake in action. Of course, the pandemic has resulted in having to find alternative ways to the excellent event that you guys have organized previously in 2019. But the podcast series has been really interesting to follow. And definitely it's been a real insight to me and to our embassy in the issues facing youth in Namibia. And what I can definitely speak to is the importance of platforms and spaces for youth to discuss their issues. And it's been a real pride for us to support that and to be part of providing that for Namibian youth, and to hear from them directly as to what kind of issues are facing them. And of course, it's you guys who are the future of Namibia and who are part of solving the issues that you're speaking about. So I just want to thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to say a few words about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hannele. Now in my hands, I hold the winner. Are we ready? Nah, that doesn't really sound enthusiastic. I mean, we use the hashtag YouthQuake and I don't feel enthusiasm. Are we ready? Then we just have to wait a little bit longer for that, okay? But I do admit that we're patient enough. I also want to thank the contributions that were given earlier. They were quite poignant, and even though I didn't give much time for that, I was now allowed to go crazy with the mic. So I want to ask once more from our stakeholders in the audience, do you have anything to add to the debate of today before we come back with our winners? Then once again, I just want to mention that the motion for today is that this House believes that our current education curriculum is crucial for the betterment of our society. So do keep that in mind. I also want to give another round of thanks to our judges, Ms. Naita Hishono from the Director of from Namibia Institute for Democracy. I want to thank our chair for today, Loire Hangula, who is a former national and regional debate champion, as well as the regional coach, And I also finally want to thank Mr. Tuda Haitula, who is a former teacher, HR officer, and currently serving as a museum development officer, who served as today's timekeeper.
It's a Quake.
I just want to remind you once again that our motion for today is that this House believes our current education curriculum is crucial for the betterment of society. I'm a little bit nervous here. I feel like I'm shaking. The papers might be falling. You know, I might make a couple of enemies once I announce this. I'm not quite sure. So allow me to start first with the best speaker for today's debate. And as I announce the speaker, I want that speaker to stand, and if you could please just give a round of applause of congratulations, okay? The best speaker in today's debate, Miss Thandiwe Ndlovu. Beautiful. Thank you, Ms. Thandiwe. And now we're getting into the big deal, right? And I have been informed that our debaters today will also, the winning debate society will be awarded with a small cash prize. And as we've heard, some of the concerns in the debate society today is the financing of it all. So we hope that this can alleviate somewhat of a burden in the societies. Winning with 770 points. No, I'm not ready to give the name just yet. Not ready to give the name just yet. Can we please welcome Zoe Titus to join Ms. Hanele over here so that they are ready on the side for when I make the announcement. Oh, wow. I mean, I think both societies brought such powerful points, and this is quite accurate in this regard. However, walking away a winner for today's debate, under the motion that this House believes that our current education curriculum is crucial for the betterment of society, is the opposition team, the Nust and Debate Society. Congratulations. Please come on stage. A louder round of applause. Can I hear like a woo-rah, something? The curtains are closing. All the debates have been set and settled. The winners have been announced, and I'm sure you've all walked away with something that you can be able to contribute to the next conversation happening outside of here. As I mentioned once more, my name is Delilah Katanga, and thank you all so much for taking out your time to join us, and to all our invited guests as well. There are refreshments that are coming along, so take this time for a little photo shoot. Perhaps you want to network a little bit. I do encourage you to network, because the body of people that we have here are quite interesting people that you want to get to know. And as we do that, if you're posting on Instagram, on Facebook, wherever it may be, please don't forget to use our hashtags. Have yourself a beautiful rest of the day.